For a long time, Islamic finance was kind of seen as a niche player, operating on the sidelines of the global markets. Well, that's not the case anymore. We're in the middle of a huge structural shift, and in this explainer, we're going to dive into what that means, and more importantly, where it's all headed. And just to give you a sense of the sheer scale we're dealing with, take a look at this number. We're talking about Sharia-compliant assets getting close to 5 trillion US dollars. Yeah, this is not a niche market anymore. This is a serious global economic force. So when you're talking about that kind of money, it naturally raises a massive question, one that governments, investors, and regulators are all trying to answer. What's next? The whole industry is moving into a completely new era, and let's just say the old rulebook might not cut it anymore.
Okay, so here's our game plan. We'll kick things off by looking at its shift into a truly global system. Then we'll get into how fintech is shaking everything up. After that, we'll explore how sukuk and sustainability are coming together, tackle the big harmonization challenge, and wrap it all up by asking, what does this all mean for an ethical financial future?
For decades, the growth of Islamic finance was, well, it was steady, but a little uneven, a bit patchy here and there. That is all changing, and fast. We're seeing new markets across Africa, Asia, and even Europe starting to adopt these frameworks, really transforming it into a global system.
So what's really fueling this global push? Well, it boils down to three big things. First, you've got demographics. Young, tech-savvy populations are actively seeking out financial options that are ethical and transparent. Second, there's economic diversification, with places like the Gulf building ambitious new financial hubs. And third, its core focus on asset-backed financing. Well, that just happens to align perfectly with the global reforms that came out of the last big financial crisis. But, of course, with this kind of explosive growth, there's always a catch. And the big one here is friction. We're talking about fragmented standards and all sorts of inconsistent rules from one country to the next. This is the main speed bump that could slow the whole thing down. Now let's talk about technology, because it's at the heart of both the problem and the potential solution. I mean, if you want to know where things are headed, you have to look at fintech. Islamic fintech is right now the fastest growing part of the entire halal economy, and it is completely changing the game. The takeaway here? Traditional Islamic banks are suddenly facing a real threat from these newer, faster, digital-first startups.
And we're seeing this play out in 4 really transformative ways. You've got digital-only banks making finance way more accessible. There's AI being used for instant compliance checks, which is huge. Peer-to-peer and crowdfunding platforms are opening up new funding avenues for small businesses. And blockchain is starting to make complicated stuff like sukuk way cheaper and more efficient.
But this creates a real tug of war. On one hand, you have innovation moving at lightning speed. On the other, you have trust. And for this to work, users need to have absolute 100% confidence that these cool new digital products are actually Sharia compliant. So what's the fix? Well, funny enough, the solution seems to be more technology. There's a huge and growing demand for automated auditing systems that can provide rock-solid, evidence-based proof of compliance. This cuts down on the slow, manual review process and really helps build that all-important trust. All right, let's shift gears and talk about the absolute backbone of Islamic capital markets, sukuk. For a very long time, this has been the go-to instrument, but now it's going through a really profound change, especially in how it connects with sustainability. And just so we're all on the same page, here's a quick refresher. A regular bond is basically a loan. It's a debt. A sukuk is different. It represents a piece of ownership in a real, tangible asset. It's a really important distinction. So the future of sukuk is looking pretty exciting, and it's headed in 3 key directions. First, we're seeing this explosion of green sukuk to fund climate-friendly projects. Second, they're being used more and more to fund huge infrastructure projects in emerging economies. And third, get ready for tokenization. It's going to completely change the market by allowing people to own small fractions of a sukuk and trade them easily. And what's so cool about this is how perfectly it lines up with another huge trend in finance, ESG, which stands for Environmental, Social, and Governance Investing. The core ideas of Islamic finance, ethics, transparency, investing in the real economy, they're a natural fit with ESG principles. But to really step up and become a global leader in sustainable finance, the industry has some homework to do. It needs a single, unified system for classifying what counts as ESG compliant. It needs standardized reporting rules.
And it needs better ways to actually measure the social impact of these investments. And that brings us right back to the biggest hurdle we mentioned earlier, harmonization. Getting everyone on the same page with standards isn't just some boring technical issue. It is literally the key that will either unlock massive global growth or hold the entire industry back. So, where do they need to focus? Well, experts have pretty much zeroed in on 4 key areas: getting unified legal documents, having consistent Sharia rulings that work across borders, creating much stronger protections for investors, and using tech to make compliance reporting seamless for everyone.
This quote really just hits the nail on the head. Harmonization isn't just something regulators would like to see, it is a competitive necessity. Simple as that. Without it, Islamic finance will stay complex and expensive, and that's going to limit how widely it can be adopted around the world. So, as we start to wrap this up, you can see that the future of Islamic finance isn't just going to be more of the same. What we're witnessing is a transition into a much more complex, much more innovative, and way more interconnected financial world. It's pretty clear the next 10 years are going to be defined by these 3 pillars. You've got technology, which is all about efficiency and access. You've got sustainability, which gives it all a powerful new sense of purpose. And then there's global integration, which is the framework that's needed to make it all happen on a truly massive scale. Which leaves us with one final, massive question. The opportunity here is absolutely enormous. But can the industry evolve with the focus and the strategy it needs to become a true global model for a more ethical, a more inclusive, and a more resilient way of banking? That is the challenge and that is the prize that lies ahead.